walk in the house after you've stepped in mud. That's a print of your shoe. Place your hands in the paint and put your paws on the paper. That's a print of your
ArtTV with Mr. McLean. Episode 3, Printmaking, Part 1. I'm sitting here in my art and music studio, also known as my basement. Notice my students' artwork hanging behind me. Today, we're talking about printmaking. Printmaking is one of the main types of art, up there with painting, drawing, and sculpture. And there are lots of different types of printmaking. And each type of printmaking has its own process, its own tools, and its own vocabulary. Whew, this is getting confusing. It's making me a little anxious. Oh, I know. Just a little puppy therapy to help us through all the vocabulary. And don't worry, actually, you really only need to know these two words: collograph and monotype. These are the two types of printmaking that we're going to be learning about today. I chose these two because they're the easiest to do without a lot of fancy supplies or tools. We'll see you later. One type of printmaking that I'm sure most of you have tried before is using a stamp. 5th grade Binghamton artist Yushin Dao reminded me that there's more than one way to make a stamp. Here, you can see that Yushin made a stamp out of a potato and then used that potato stamp to create a very cool design of a cat. Way to go, Yushin! Remember, printmaking is the type of art where you're making copies of a design. When we're making a collograph print, the design that we're going to make copies of is going to be glued down onto a piece of cardboard, kind of like a collage. You can see that I've chosen to make this collograph print a portrait. Think about what you want to make your design. It can be anything. Your design could have animals, people, nature, aliens. It could just be a really cool abstract design. It can really be anything you want. It's your art, it's your world you're creating. It's your choice. When you're making a collograph, you want to pay special attention to materials that can add texture to your print. Wait, did someone say texture? So yes, remember to add texture. The word collograph is kind of like the word collage. The first part of the word, kolla, comes from the Greek word for glue, and graph is Greek for writing. Now let's take a look at the work of Glenn Alps. He was an American artist and college professor. He's famous for using the collograph technique and for naming it. Can you imagine what different things that he would have had to glue down to his collograph printing plate to create the textures that we see in his prints? While I work on gluing things to my collograph plate, let's start thinking about monotype, the other type of printmaking that we're learning about today. Artist Karen Lederer is here to talk about her special way to monoprint while using watercolors.
So to make a watercolor monotype, you take a piece of plexiglass and then you paint on top of it with watercolor paint. So the watercolor paint that you use is the kind that comes in tubes. And then you can also work on top of the painting with water-soluble materials like water-soluble crayons. And then once your painting is dry, you put a piece of wet paper on top of your painting and you're going to run it through the press. When it comes out the other side, you pull your paper up. It has captured everything that was on the plate, and you have your print. So here is what a watercolor monoprint looks like. I love the prints because they're really vibrant. You can get lots of different textures that would be hard to get with just regular painting onto paper, such as all the little bubbles and things that you see here. And you can really layer crayon with watercolor, which is really beautiful.
Thanks, Karen. Your work is really beautiful. The color is explosive. Now let's try to make our own monotype print. Take a look at the materials. You can use the back of a baking tin instead of a piece of plexiglass. You can see here, I'm adding water to my watercolors to soften them up so that I can get even more color on my printing plate. Monotype printing is the most like painting. It's also the only form of printmaking where you'll only make one copy of your design. Of course, mono means one. When I'm making this abstract mono print, I'm thinking about how the different colors will work with each other. I'm trying to think about the composition, which means how the viewer will move their eye around my picture. Here, I'm adding some stencils. There. Now, I'll place the paper carefully on top of the printing plate. Use one hand to hold the paper so it won't move, and the other hand I'll be pushing down and rubbing evenly. Then you pull the print, and voila! This is the best part and the most magical part about printmaking. When you take your print off of your printing plate and you see how it turned out. Even when you plan your design out carefully, you're never quite sure how a print will turn out. You know what? I'm going to try and get one more print off of this monotype. When we do this, it's called a ghost print. Now I'm adding crayon to the original monotype. I'll add some watercolor on top of the crayon to create a wax resist effect. There, finished. Now, let's go back to the first type of printmaking that we were working on by looking at the collographs of Cuban artist Belkis Ayon. She would painstakingly glue little pieces of paper to her printing plates to create the luxurious textures and patterns in her prints. They're stunning. She didn't have fancy art materials, but she did have paper and glue. That's one reason why she used the collograph process of printmaking. The subject matter of Ayon's prints were figures and scenes based on an all-male Afro-Cuban secret society called the Akuba. Her figures have no mouths, perhaps to represent the fact that they will never reveal any of the secrets of their secret society. Ayon's impressive work has inspired me to add a lot more detail to my printing plate. Now it's time for you to start making your own collograph. Here are the materials that you'll need. But remember, the artist Belkis Ayon only had glue and scrap paper and cardboard to make her prints. So, if you at least have those materials, you can do this. You'll see me using hot glue, but you should be using a glue like Elmer's glue. Glue stick won't work. Make sure that you wait for the glue to dry before you print your printing plate. Another thing you need to remember is that when you're making your plate and you're gluing things down to your collograph, you don't want them to be too high, meaning that everything should be on the same level. If one thing sticks up too high, when you go to print it, it'll rip the paper.
When you walk in the house after you've stepped in mud, that's a print of your Place your hands in the paint and put your paws on the paper. That's a print of your
I was was very lucky that two 5th grade artists from Binghamton, New York sent their collographs into ArtTV for this episode. Let's start with Madison O'Brien's. Look at all the cool things she used on her plate. The bottle caps look great. I'm especially impressed with how Madison did the text. She made sure to put the letters on backwards so that when she printed her plate, they read the right way. Great job, Madison. Artist Nalia Dennis used softer things on her printing plate, and you can see that effect in her print. The softness of the color and the texture are wonderful. Great job, Nalia. Both of you have created interesting prints with different textures. Well done. Now before we go, let's take a look at some of the work the artists have emailed me. Great job, Alexis. This found object sculpture is so fun. The colors are really working together. And Cooper, good eye on seeing that your Christmas tree was a found object sculpture already. Very smart. And these artists from Dryden did an amazing job on our collage project from episode 1. Whoa, I wish I was living in that rainbow world. Wicked cool, Stella. Until next time, stay creative, and don't forget to email me your artwork.
The way that something feels, that texture is the way that something feels. Oh, what's this? That feels smooth. That's the texture word. Texture is the way that something feels, the way that something looks like it feels.
ArtTV with Mr. McLean.